Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages you've had. F. Scott Fitzgerald. There comes a false doctrine that I've noticed. So, if you have been with me from the very beginning, episode 1, I pretty much talk about me getting out of my wilderness and finally seeing who God was and how it changed my life completely. Everything about it, everything about my life has done a 180. And can I really say a complete 180? No, but for the most part, like 160, 170, definitely. But because of where I came from, because of the pain that I was going through, and there was no lifeguard. There was no buoy in the middle of the sea that I can hold on to. It was just me and you're gonna drown, girl. So I was dying, and I was a shell of myself, unrecognizable in some points of it. And it took me a while for me to understand that people won't get it. People will think any kind of misconceptions about you. When my depression was really, at a all-time high, I couldn't handle it. I couldn't cope. I couldn't hide it any longer. Even though I was going to the gym and I did lose a lot of weight, because I wasn't eating correctly. Between depression and you not eating correctly, it showed up pretty much in my skin, So if you're not drinking enough water and not eating enough fruits and vegetables, obviously your skin is going to suffer, So I had a lot of breakouts, stuff like that. Face shrunk. So I had more, of a health decline, but people are mean, instead of them coming to you and actually trying to figure out the facts, a lot of people, they came up with their own theories of what it was, and I've heard them all. It's wild, so it's to the point where it's just like, what's wrong with her? Is it, the last thing I heard was, is it depression? But I've heard everything from she's lazy to is she on drugs, and that's one thing when it comes to the Black community. It's just like, if somebody sees that you've lost weight and they haven't seen you in a long time, I've heard this more than once, and it's just like, damn, you skinny. You sure you ain't a crackhead? And it's just like, and I'm sorry for the way I've said it, but it's true. And it's like a tinge of like, the hell you mean? Maybe I went to the gym, and it's usually someone that's bigger than you that will ask that question. But I'm not even gonna go down that rabbit hole. But people have a misconception, and they stick to these things and they don't know all the facts. And yes, it was one of those type of things where I was withdrawn and I went inwards, but it was easier for me to forgive them. And then my step process was me forgiving myself. But one of the hardest things that I couldn't do, it took me a while to get it, was because I didn't understand it. And that was the church, I wasn't raised in a church of, the girl that went to church every Sunday. I didn't go to church for years. Maybe I was a young girl, 5, 6, 7, 8, after that was the cutoff. I didn't go to church. I believed in God, but I was pretty much mainstream with society. It's just like, yeah, God. But it wasn't a active factor in my life, so when you hurt so bad, and you can't take it anymore, and your only option is to cry out, and finally it's just so you finally called me, and God is literally like, so, you see me again, and it was one of those type of things of me having to get back to who I was, and all that love and acceptance and just trying to be understood. I was trying to get from everybody else. I finally got it with him, I got it with God, and I finally started to give that love to myself. So, some of the old scars, they're starting to fade away, and the new wounds are starting to heal up, so yeah, I got some battle wounds, but it's all good. Much better for it. But during my I would say cocoon stage, I listened to a lot of sermons. I read the Bible a whole lot more. I really started to get into the word and letting the word get into me, because you can read Bible, through and through, every single scripture up in there, but do you apply it, and that's hard. Applying it is a whole lot harder than for you to say, I know what he's talking about. He's talking about John chapter, da, da, da. It doesn't work like that. You have to really be it. And when I finally reached that level of that feeling, that type of love, that unconditional love that God gives you, I was too happy. I was too thrilled. Okay. I was too proud. It was on some like, well, God this and God that. You drop a spoon. Well, God got you. It was one of those type of things that it was, can I get an amen? With everything, because I was that proud. I was that happy, that I made it, and it's just miraculous thing of someone that was walking dead is now alive. Who is not going to be ecstatic and over the moon if they had a Lazarus effect? Anybody would, so one of the biggest things was because I felt God's love, and all those things that those sermons was telling me, it was just like, wow, it's true. It really is true, But there comes a faulty with it. Not all churches, but I can understand, one sermon, I would say one church, he goes by saying church hurt. I do understand what church hurt is, church hurt is. And I was so gun-ho, damn near Peter, on some like, I'm about to put my brass knuckle rings on if anybody says anything. But I was gung-ho for God, and when a church doesn't fully understand what you've gone through, when I was, pretty much, if I would talk to someone, and they're Christian or, or whatever, they're very inside the church, and doesn't even have to be Christian. And the crazy part about it is like, you'll tell them your story, and instead of it being like, oh, wow, you seen what God love is, welcome to the family, it was just like, are you sure you healed? Because you look kind of sad right now. And it was just like, I do? I don't feel like how I felt before, but and because you're so on the ball of, I'm hungry for God, I'm on fire for God, that me listening to those sermons, like, you're kind of like naive when you go inside the church, because you're expecting them like, well, I felt what God love is, and you are a representation of God, not him himself, but God's love. I wasn't, you're not expecting to get the judgment blow. And at some points I did receive that, it's just like, well, people that are depressed, you're not fully with God then. You don't know who God is if you feel depression, because, God heals, and, you'll get out of it as if like it's like a blink of an eye. And sometimes that church member, that preacher, that pastor, bishop, whoever it is, if you've never gone through that wilderness, you would never know what the hell that is in there. You don't know what bumps in the night in there. So to come at a approach of, are you sure that that you actually was walking with God, and you've never been through that walk? Who are you? Take the beam out your eye. So I can understand, and I've seen people, I've spoken to people, I've been in groups. People will shy away from church, and some people will actually make fun of church. They'll make fun of church members, stuff like that. And it's like, it's not the fact I'm on the fence, but it's like, I can see why somebody would do that. And I can also see why the church, would be like this. But it's, I love me some TD Jakes, but TD Jakes is talking about Nike, right? And he had a visitation with Nike, and every single employee there knew what Nike was all about. They knew their mission. They knew what they represented. They knew Nike for like the back of their hand. And they never spoke about themselves personally, but they spoke about the company. They were representations of the company. Not one person, down to the janitor, to the CEO, they all knew Nike's motto, mantra, whatever they stand for. And it's one of those type of things where if you are in God's kingdom, or you want to be in God's kingdom, and you've gone through a couple of arenas, and now you kind of know the ropes a little bit, it is your responsibility at this point to know your mantra. You're supposed to know your motto. So it was a very weird thing, because it's a rejection, and it got to the point where it was just like, God, people will judge you for anything. If your hair ain't combed right, she must be depressed. She gotta be. Maybe I don't feel like doing my hair today. Or, it could be down to anything. If I'm going to the store, and it's a store that's literally like 4 blocks away from me, and I'm, everything that happened now with this whole pandemic, my son is home, stuff like that, I'm not getting dolled up to go to the corner store. No. No, you're gonna pay me to go to the store and be dolled up to go to the corner store for 5 minutes and walk back. And people will literally, she wearing slacks, and she wearing a t-shirt and a Nike hat. Yeah, I am. What's wrong? Is something wrong? So it's just like, people will critique you in anything that you do, but they don't see your heart, or they look for discrepancies to faulty with your heart, what's inside your heart, and I didn't understand it. So I used to get angry, and I used to be on some clapback. And I can't even say used to, because that means I'm lying. Sometimes I still feel that way. And it's hard to kind of just girl, get over it, shut up, have a seat, you know, because if you can forgive other people that are not in church every Sunday, they don't read their Bible, stuff like that, you can forgive them easy. It's easier for you to forgive them because it's just like, okay, you don't know God's love. I get it. Being forgiving and stuff like that is hard. I get that. Pain, I get that. But it was almost like my respect for some members of churches went down because it literally was like almost like a facade. It was just like, so you don't really show the principles of it, you know? And then you meet people that's just like, God is proud of you, man. God is proud of you. Don't matter what comes out your mouth, how you feel, you know, you still have that same mantra in your heart. I don't care about what words come out your mouth. It's what's in your heart. You know, you have a pure heart. You want to help people. You know, you just want to be you. And you're not finna judge nobody. You know, I can't judge anyone. I'm sorry, I can't. From where I've came from, my depression was so bad, you know, and people will think all type of stuff. And it's just like, it is what it is. You know, what can I tell you? If you've never been through it, you won't get it, you know. So there is a level of empathy that needs to be there. And empathy is something that is getting to become rare nowadays, and it's one of those things where the expectation went down. You know, it was a full short. It was a full short. You know, it was a lackluster ending. And I wanted it so bad. I wanted to be accepted by that church so bad, you know, and it was just like, yo, I get it. I understand. All those sermons make sense now, like, you know, and it was just like, nah, you don't get it. And you're sitting there at first, you're like, do I really not get it? You know, I'm sitting here praying to God, like, oh, maybe I got it wrong, you know, and it got to the point where it's just like, maybe you ain't get it wrong. You pray to God every day. Sometimes, you know, 4, 5, 6 times throughout the day. You good. Like, you're okay. And you get your confirmations. I've got my confirmations time and time again from God. And it's just like, I know when I'm not in the will, you know, or not in his covering. Because I could feel the anger, right? You know, I could feel it's a whole shift, you know, and it's something that I will see, I will read, I'll hear somebody say, and it's just like, yo, you better get back on it. You were there. Where are you going? We ain't got time for this. Like, we got things to do, you know, and as of right now, I missed 2 episodes. I'm very sorry, guys. But I am working on a lot of things on the back end, and I'm trying to get everything kind of formed and molded, and soon it will be a walking thing. But I had to see that pastors are human, and it doesn't matter the amount of church, you know, how many people watch that person, doesn't matter how many people follow them, it doesn't matter. That person still is a human being. That person still makes mistakes, you know, and that person will probably offend you, and they have no idea why, you know, and it was just like, I looked up to you, bro. I really, truly looked up to you. I was literally, every time you came with a video, I was watching, you know, because it's just like, at one point you were hitting, and some pastors, or not even pastors, just some people in Christianity itself, they look to get at your neck. And that always struck a chord with me, because it was just like, you almost kind of come like, I can't wait to beat you up. And then if you get offended, it'd be like, well, you know, you're offended because I convicted you. No, I'm offended because of your execution. Like, you're not as nice as you seem. You know, you can say something in love, but not be, I gotta do tough love all the time. There's a time, place for everything, but true empathy, it is true empathy, but it's more like emotional intellect. Once, if you have high emotional intelligence, you can see who deserves tough love and who doesn't. Someone that has had toughness all their life, and, to the point where they became a shell of themselves, I don't think they need anything tough anymore. I think they need all the tenderness in the world. And there are people that, everybody has a different story, different, approach to get through them. And I think it comes to you having to have that awareness of really reading the person, really getting down to their level, because that person may admire you. They may admire your body of work. They may admire the person, the work that you've done, and all that respect can go down by how you size the other person up. I spoke to someone the other day, and he has a nonprofit, and he actually works with other nonprofits. It's like an incubator. Patrick, love you. But he said this, and it kind of stuck to me. He said that when he goes into a room, he acts like he doesn't know anything. He don't know. He's coming in to learn so he can soak everything up. And I completely understood it. It's just like, you go into an arena. I don't care if you've been into that room 1 billion times. You act like you don't know. You'd be surprised what you learn from anybody. I've had conversations with anyone, everyone. And I've met people that are CEOs of major companies, in my sales when I was knocking on doors. I've met people that had it all and lost everything. I had people that have been into drugs. I've known people that were depressed, have suicide, stuff like anything. And the gems that they drop is just like, I could talk to you for hours, man. So it's one of those type of things where you never know who you can learn from, and you never know who God speaks through, so come with at least try to understand the other person, especially if you are a Nike employed, you work for Nike, know the motto, know the mantra, and apply the mantra. But yeah, it's a real issue though, because I noticed it, and even in the comments, I think somebody had commented something that was just like, person didn't want to post something, or didn't want to say something because, God forbid the church girl commits suicide. And it was just like, whoa. Like, people say some wild stuff, but it's just one of those type of things where it's just like, I'm learning to, like, pretty much, you got to let stuff roll off your shoulder. It's just like, it is what it is. Somebody's just trying to get at your neck all the time. It's like, all right, bro, I get it. Like, I guess you just really want to help. I don't know what it is, but I came here because I love God that much. That's the reason why I'm in church in the first place, because I know God's love. And people will get mad at God. The church did this, so I'm mad at God. And the thing is that God gets the blame for a lot of stuff that he don't even deserve. It's just like, you met one jerk that was in church, and like, you literally hardened your heart for God, and it's just like, it's not God, sweetie. It's that jerk. I get it. I completely agree with you. I'm gonna give you a big old hug because I get it, but it happens, and you just have to separate the man from the kingdom, and it's nobody's fault, because it's like, I make mistakes too, because I done judge somebody, and it was just like, girl, you have no idea. Have a seat, Toya. Have a seat. You don't know what the hell you're talking about right now. You look real stupid, so it's just like, all right, fine, but everybody has that foolish moment. Just don't have them too many times, so that was just my perspective of what happened with me with coming to church. And I met so many beautiful people in the church. I really have. Just pure-hearted people, just loving people, you know. And it's just like, this is the reason why, you know, I see why God moves. I see how God does a work, you know, and it makes you want to do more. It makes you, this is the reason why I work for Nike. You know, look at my people, you know, and when things like that happen in the beginning, you know, I was hurt. It was just like, dude, why are you trying to get at me so bad? Like, depression is real, kid. PTSD is real, you know, and there's so many other, you know, diagnoses. And to equate it to, if you've been diagnosed with something and you're not cured by it, then then you're not one with God. You don't know God. That's wild to me. You know, that's ludicrous. That's really wild. You know, so there's a process to everything. God made a brain just like how he made a body. And he gave us governance over everything. Not everything, but, you know, pretty much over the world. We learn the body all the time. That's the reason why we have doctors. I'm pretty sure if a pastor had a heart attack, he going to the hospital. He want a doctor to fix his body. So if your mind had an attack, go to the psychologist. God put the brain down there and he put all the information for us to learn it. You know, why can't God be intertwined with psychology? Why is that such a rift, you know? And I see it sometimes where it was like a picture of a guy like with picket signs. It was just like, Jesus Christ hates psychology. He hates, and I was just like, everybody fitting to die, because shoot, psychology is the study of the mind. It's science, just like how biology, you know, anatomy, all these things are science of the body. Your brain is a part of your body. So when your body gets sick, you go to the doctor. When your mind gets sick, where do you go? To the doctor. That doesn't mean that if you have cancer, you're going to the doctor to see if you can fix it. Of course, you are also going to church to fix it. But that doesn't mean that God doesn't want you to see the oncologist every 6 months, every 2 weeks, whatever. So I would feel that that's something God would want you to do, you know, and I'm not going to sit there and judge you for it. I've had depression, you know, I know what it's like. I'm not going to, you know, and certain things that I don't know, I'm not going to act like I do know, because I don't. I really don't. Please tell me, you know, so I can fully understand it. And I can just be your support. You know, I can just be there just to listen. Because some people don't want, you know, just, you don't have to fix it. I just need you to listen. And it's just like, I'm all ears. All ears, you know, and it was one of those type of things where that's what God did for me. He didn't, they say God is a gentleman. He really is. God didn't shove, you need to do this and do that and do this. He literally was just like, talk. What's going on, girl? And I did. In the beginning, that's all it was. I talked. And I went from someone that, a little girl, to that damn near 33, 34, being a quiet little girl, to now I can't stop talking. I talk too much. And God released the floodgates of, you better speak your mind and shine that light, girl. Of course, have a filter. You know what I taught you, but you better talk. And this is the reason why I'm on this podcast. But anyway, I think I'm going to be going back into the episodes. I will be doing season 2 very soon. Going into production of it. So there is going to be a taper off, but I missed you guys. I really did. And I don't want to just pull it off like a cliffhanger, but it's good to be back. You guys have a good night, all right? Speak to you guys next week.